Before I start Tier 7, I want to go back and talk about the Captain Tsubasa RPGs that I mentioned in Tier 6 but had no clue about. Luckily, Pain666 in the comments left some good information. I've told them in the past that I would use their information in a video and I completely forgot, so I'm making sure I get this one in there. Thanks a lot, Pain, I really appreciate it. According to their comment, the Captain Tsubasa games that are considered JRPGs are Tsubasa 1 and 2 for the NES, and 3 and 4 for the SNES. Maybe J for the SNES as well, and Tsubasa for Sega CD is JRPG. They also say first Tsubasa was localized as Tecmo Soccer Cup, and as far as I can tell, all of the Captain Tsubasa games were developed by Tecmo. Now with that out of the way, we can start Tier 7. Starting off Tier 7 are NES demakes of Tales of Phantasia, Final Fantasy VII, and Chrono Trigger. A demake is a remake of a game, but with older graphics, typically for older consoles. I can't find anything about the specific studio or individuals that developed these ROMs, but I can tell you that they come from China.
It comes from China.
Meriminoid. Shinkai Densetsu Meriminoid is a 24-episode anime series written by Nobuaki Kishima, Yasushi Hirano, and most notably Kenji Terada, whose work includes many other popular anime, and he was even a scenario writer for the first 3 Final Fantasy games. The anime aired on TV Asahi from October 9, 1997 to April 2, 1998. An RPG for the PS1 based on the anime was developed by Shout Design Works and published by Shing in August 1999, exclusively for Japan. The player is a mermaid trying to find the secrets of her race. From what little information I found on this game, it seems agreed on that the game is average at best. If nothing else, I have to say that at least the UI is aesthetic. Kanye Quest. Kanye Quest 3030 was created by a developer named Phoenix and released in July 2013 for Windows. The game is unlicensed and not authorized by Kanye West himself. Kanye Quest is a hip-hop themed sci-fi RPG where Kanye West falls into a portal that sends him to the year 3030. Many other rappers appear in the game like Eminem, Nicki Minaj, MF Doom, and a clone of Lil B the Bass God, who is the main antagonist. In 2015, it was discovered that if the player typed the word "ascend" into a dialog box, it would reveal a secret section of the game, and the player would be told that this area was designed to teach them something beneficial. If the player goes backwards, they will enter a room with a QR code, which has to be screen captured at multiple points in order to form the whole code. The website that was linked to the QR code had nothing but the name Phoenix Gregory placed on the screen in a Comic Sans font. After inputting all of the needed codes, the player would be teleported to a final terminal that would congratulate them on their ascension, and then prompt for another code. Upon entering the correct code and agreeing to participate further, the player would be asked for their private information. All of this was theorized to be linked to a cult called Ascensionism. In 2022, it was discovered that the creator of the game was Clara Hope, an artist from Adelaide who created the game as a high school project. She stated that the Ascensionism portion of the game was originally a separate project before she combined it into Kanye Quest. Sorcery Saga Great Curry God. Curse of the Great Curry God was developed by CompileHeart for the PlayStation Vita in 2013, and it's based on the original Mado Monogatari released in 1989. The story revolves around a young girl who was recently suspended from magic school named Pooparoo, whose favorite curry shop may be going out of business soon due to a chain store that's opened up in town. Luckily for Pooparoo, she comes across a magical recipe book with the recipe for the ultimate curry. She goes dungeon crawling for ingredients in an attempt to save her favorite restaurant. The Hybrid Front. The Hybrid Front is a turn-based strategy game developed by Sega and released for the Mega Drive in Japan in July 1994, with the re-release for the Virtual Console in 2007. The game is similar to Advance Wars for the Game Boy Advance, with color-coded units for the player to determine their own from enemies. The game begins with someone accessing a history archive on a computer, which shows a revolution that occurred in the 2080s that led to a series of wars that lead up to the game's setting in the 26th century. The story was written by Masahiro Noda, who has been well known in the Japanese science fiction scene since the 1960s. In the Hybrid Front, Earth's resources are running low and global warming is having a massive negative impact on the planet, and humanity has allowed itself to be conquered by a corporate hegemony. The wars in the game take place in a few locations, including Earth, the Moon, and Mars. Lagrange Point. Lagrange Point was developed and published by Konami for the Famicom in April 1991, exclusively for Japan. The title of the game is in reference to Lagrangian points. the 5 positions in space where a body of negligible mass could be placed which would then maintain its position relative to 2 existing massive bodies. I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea what the fuck any of that means. I was never good at math and science. In the 22nd century, humanity began to move into outer space. 3 space colonies were constructed at a Lagrange point: the Isis cluster, 2 artificial biospheres named Land 1 and Land 2, and a satellite. 55 years after the cluster was constructed, a biohazard outbreak occurred on Land 2. No one was able to get in contact with Land 2, as any attempt to do so was met with static. A research team led by Jean arrives at Land 1. The team is attacked by a group of robots, and the shuttle explodes due to damage during the battle, knocking out Jean. When Jean awakens in the medical center of Isis City, he finds one of his team members fatally wounded. This team member informs him that their goal was to find a researcher at Land 2's Bio-Research Lab. Jean sets off to find him in Land 2, wherever he is. Barkley Shut Up and Jam Gaiden. This game was developed by a studio named Tales of Games Studios and released in January 2008. The game is presented as a sequel to Barkley Shut Up and Jam and Space Jam, featuring traditional JRPG battles and dungeons. In 2041 post-cyber-apocalyptic New York, Charles Barkley performs a powerful chaos dunk during a basketball game and accidentally kills almost everyone in attendance during the game. Because of this, basketball is banned and basketball players are hunted and killed. In 2053, another chaos dunk is performed in Manhattan and Charles Barkley is blamed and hunted down by the B-ball removal department led by Michael Jordan. At 2014 Games Done Quick, the developers stated that they had never played the original Shut Up and Jam game, but came up with the idea for Gaiden after brainstorming ideas for an RPG that would make them laugh. I wasn't sure about including this next game. I'm still not sure, but it's on the list, so I'm gonna put it in the video. Far be it from me to act like any sort of moral arbiter or a sensitive person on the internet, but I just don't feel comfortable describing the plot and gameplay of this game as it relates to real victims and their families affected, when everything up to this point has been fun and fantasy and fiction. I'm also just not in the true crime business. I never will be. I do video games. Now that I'm done acting like a moral fig, Super Columbine Massacre RPG was developed by Danny Ladon and released on April 20th, 2005, the 6th anniversary of the tragedy. Ladon always wanted to create a game, but never did due to his lack of game design and programming knowledge. He was inspired to create a game about Columbine by his own experience being bullied and the effect that the incident had on his life. He stated that the tragedy resonated with him since he had once been a loner, a misfit, and a bully kid in high school. Ladon intended the game to be a critique of how traditional media sensationalized the shooting, as well as a parody of video games themselves. Now we can get back to the real video games. Ephemeral Fantasia. Ephemeral Fantasia was developed and published by Konami in 2000 in Japan and 2001 in the US and Europe. It's a standard JRPG, but it has the addition of a guitar minigame that can be played several times throughout the game. The story happens over a constantly looping 5-day period. This is caused by a time loop created by the game's antagonist, whose name I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. The game was originally going to be released for the Dreamcast, but was later moved to the PS2. A development team member revealed that the game had additional content planned, but that was cut when the move to PS2 happened. As interesting as I think time travel and time loop plots are, it turns out that this game is shit. Metacritic gave the game a score of 48 out of 100, and Francesca Reyes of Next Gen Magazine said, "Don't be fooled by the cute characters on the box promising console RPG goodness. You'll find none of that here. Keep moving." Baroque. Baroque is a roguelike RPG originally released for the Sega Saturn in 1998 by Entertainment Software Publishing, and it was ported to the PS1 the following year. The game was conceived by Kazunari Yonemitsu, who was involved with its design and created the narrative. Baroque was originally in production for the PC 9800 series, but Yonemitsu's wish for 3D graphics resulted in it being developed for the Sega Saturn instead. A remake for the PS2 and Wii was published by Sting Entertainment in 2007 in Japan and by Atlas for the USA and Rising Star Games for Europe. This remake was ported to iOS in 2012, and an enhanced version was released in 2020 for the Nintendo Switch. The game is set in a post-apocalyptic world where an experiment was conducted in an attempt to understand the absolute God. This experiment caused devastating climate change, with humans becoming physically twisted by manifestations of guilt. The experiment was led by a being called an Archangel, and this Archangel guides the protagonist through a randomly generated dungeon called the Neuro Tower in an attempt to find the absolute God and fix the world. With this game being a roguelike, deaths in the dungeon advance the narrative. I'm not even gonna try to attempt to pronounce this game's name, so I'll throw it up on the screen now. This series is the oldest and longest living Chinese RPG series. They're developed for PC by the Domo studio of Taiwanese developer Softstar Entertainment. The series heavily incorporates Chinese mythology and is one of the so-called twin swords of Softstar, with the sister RPG series, The Legend of Sword and Fairy. The first game was released in 1990, and the latest was released in 2020. There have only been 2 games officially translated into English. Before I get into the last game, I once again want to beg for subscribers, so if you're enjoying the series, hit that subscribe button. Yeah, smash that like button, yeah, I truly appreciate everybody watching. Thank you so much. And now the final game of Tier 7 of the JRPG Iceberg, Brandish. Brandish was developed by Nihon Falcom and released in October 1991 for the PC 9801 and FM Towns. Koei ported the game to the Super Nintendo in 1994, and the game saw a North American release the following year. A remake titled Brandish: The Dark Revenant was released in Japan in 2009 and released worldwide in 2015 for the PlayStation Vita. Brandish is a top-down dungeon crawler. God, I'm dying. I need water. Brandish is a top-down dungeon crawler with the objective of escaping 40 floors in 5 different areas that are all filled with monsters, traps, and puzzles. A swordsman named Ares is pursued by his nemesis Dela, who seeks revenge on him for slaying her master. When Dela attacks Ares, her magic causes the ground to collapse, and they both fall into the cursed ruins of Vittoria. Ares must escape the ruins, with Dela constantly chasing after him, though both of them are trying to escape the ruins. The ending can change slightly depending on whether or not Ares decides to help Dela out of danger in events that occur later on in the game.